you're in that place where you kind of feel like, okay, I can't trust the decisions I'm making. I don't know what I'm doing. I feel like I'm on the wrong path. Come back to the basics.
You
Yeah.
just do the fundamental things, you will put yourself in position. Not an ounce of fear, really, that there's something bad that could happen. And welcome back, folks, to episode number 55. And as you can see, there's only two people on the podcast once again. It is me, Nazario Pengallo, back from a week hiatus, and sticking with it, Evan Aber back once again. He's not missing a beat.
No, could not miss a beat. After missing the first, I don't know, 28 episodes, I feel like I've got some catching up to do. So as consistent as possible. Yeah, obviously a really fun week for both of us. I think you had a little less fun week than I did, but our dear compatriot Cole Bissett is currently touring in Italy. If you haven't seen on the Instagram, go check it out. He's dropped a few vlogs. I'm sure he's archived those on the stories. So go check it out. Keep up with what he's doing. I myself just got back from a nice little jaunt up in the Northeast, visiting some friends up in New Hampshire and Boston and that area, which was very pleasant. The weather was fantastic, very cool and breezy. How was your week away from the craziness, Nazario?
Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty good. Last week, I couldn't be on the episode because Cole was about to go to Italy, and he had to do it at this certain time, and I was busy doing something else. So Evan and Cole recorded, but then Cole obviously off to Italy. We can't wait to see when he gets back to tell us all the stories. But I've actually had my work training a couple days this week, and then I'm beginning on Monday. And if you guys don't know, I am going to be a camp counselor for 9 weeks of the summer, but I'm doing day camp counseling. So I just get there at 8 in the morning. My kids get dropped off. They leave at like 4:30, but we play a lot of games, do a lot of fun stuff in between that. So I'm very excited for that. Hopefully I'll have some fun stories that I'm able to share about some kids doing some crazy things like they tend to do. So it should be a blast. Evan, any special things from your week other than what you said to shout out before we jump into the quote?
No, I think the only thing we're gonna have to have a whole episode for Cole when he comes back, just so he can talk about Italy and his
Question for
whole.
you though: did you see the game winner last night in Game
Ah,
Two of the Stanley Cup Finals? It was
I did
pretty
not.
exciting. The Florida
Um,
Panthers, they nearly choked the game away. Let's set the stage first. They were up 4-3. They let Edmonton tie it up with, I repeat, 17 seconds left in the game.
yeah.
They go to a double overtime. So they have played 80 minutes of hockey, and they go into this second overtime. The first goal just wins it, and Brad Marchand sneaks one through the wickets of the goalie. It was a fascinating end to Game 2. I mean, the finals right now, we have the NBA Finals, Tyrese Halliburton hitting a game winner in Game 1, crazy comeback by the Pacers. That
This
was on
started yesterday, right?
Thursday. And
Yeah.
then the Stanley Cup, we've had Edmonton win Game 1, and then Florida Panthers winning in overtime of Game 2 last night. So just absolute thrillers going on. And then you still got the Women's College World Series in softball that ended last night. Texas took that. And then we got the college baseball tournament going on. So just a ton of great sports stuff going on right now. But we are going to jump into our quote for this week. Look at that, 3 minutes and 40 seconds into the episode. We're already getting into the quote. So hopefully, if you guys want to put in the comments that hopefully that's helping you guys to stay connected and not get lost in our banter that we usually do. So we're going to get into the quote for episode 55. This comes from John F. Kennedy, JFK, as he's better known, a former president of the United States. We can have faith in the future only if we have faith in ourselves. I'll read it one more time from JFK. We can have faith in the future only if we have faith in ourselves. Evan, would you like to start us off here today?
Yeah, I can launch. Yeah, I think obviously kind of a polarizing figure. Uh, any political figure is gonna be, but one of the just we're kind of continuing this theme, this vein of trust and faith and belief. Um, And I think that's kind of what I turn to first in this quote is, do we trust ourselves? Right? It's different to trust other people. It's really hard to trust other people. But I think oftentimes we don't really think about trusting ourselves in our decisions, in our actions, in the path we're taking. And you kind of have to believe that what you're doing, what you're achieving, what you're deciding is correct. And you do that with prayer and with continued discernment and whatnot, right? But it's kind of this gray area of I'm launching off, I'm jumping off the dock, I'm jumping out of the nest, and I have to believe that what I'm doing is the right decision. And that can be hard. Um, but I will say the other thing I think of is that, a lot of times, when I talk to old people, they'll a common thing they'll say is always like, "Oh, well, this is the world you're inheriting." Whenever they talk about any of the issues, be it social or political or economic or natural or whatever, they'll talk about how this is the world that you are going to inherit. And so that is our future ultimately. Like our generation is that generation that's gonna inherit all the problems, all the good stuff, but also all the bad stuff. And so, starting to look at this, like, we have to have trust in ourselves. We have to have that ability to say, "I need to take responsibility for what I'm doing. I have to trust in my actions. I have to believe that what I'm doing with authority is correct, is true, and is where I'm meant to be." Because if we don't believe that, then there's no point in choosing. Something I said to my mom this week was like, I would rather have someone that I work with or someone that I'm around, I would rather have them make a wrong decision or a bad decision full-heartedly than make a good decision half-heartedly, right? Like anything. We talk about the gym, we talk about faith, we talk about diet, we talk about life. If you launch into it full-heartedly, you're sure to fail or succeed, A, but also you're sure to learn something. But if you do everything lukewarm and half-hearted, it's just gonna fall apart and you're gonna be, Humpty Dumpty, "Oh, whatever, doesn't matter." And so I think believing in ourselves, trusting ourselves full-heartedly that we're on the right path is what this first brings to mind for me.
Yeah, and to just set a little stage here, JFK, he said this during his after the election was over when accepting the it says that he stated this when accepting the Democratic Party nomination for the presidency of the United States. So in July of 1960, so obviously the election came later in that year. So before he became president is when he said this quote, and JFK went on to become the 35th president of the United States, and that kind of makes me think about it a little bit differently. Obviously, a similar way as you, Evan, but if he says this in July, this is before he is elected. So this is
Yeah.
kind of like a rallying call as well to both his campaign for the presidency and trying to unite the United States. And obviously, we know 1960, like, there's a lot going on in America. Obviously, you're still post World War II. I believe you would have been post Korean War. Vietnam War would have been a major talking point. I don't remember exactly when the Vietnam War began, but definitely right around this time. So, plenty of turmoil going on in the United States. And so, you have to have someone that you can look to as a leader if you're going to have a country succeed. And that is kind of a polarizing thing as well, as you talked about, Evan. I mean, we see with JFK, he was assassinated. There were some people out there who did not like him. And even in the presidency now, we know there's one confirmed assassination attempt on our current president before he was elected for the second time. So when you look at this, you think, well, are we really having faith in ourselves and faith in our society if we are doing these things? If people are trying to eliminate the person in power? And obviously I would say no to that for those people in specifically. But with what we're talking about, we have to have this faith because we talked about this in discipleship, Evan. We actually had a really good conversation, and Cole disagreed with us. But we believe, Evan and I said, that humanity is always on this trend. Wow, this is weird to like put on the visuals, but if you're on audio, just see like a trend line, and you see a trend line that is always going positive. And we talked about this, and that humanity is always going in a positive direction, or I think they call it a positive regression line. I could be wrong. But basically, the average line of whether humanity is getting good or worse as time goes along. That average line, that average trend is always positive. That is what Evan and I said. Because as human beings, obviously we fell. But at our heart, at our core, we are images of God. And if we are images of God, then we have to be good. We have to have a good nature. And we said that during this time, like during humans' time on earth in the fallen world, we are trying to get back to what it was like before the fall. And so we said humans are inherently good. We have a good nature, obviously a fallen nature as well, but we are still progressing on that line in a positive way. So that's what I think about when I think about this quote. We have to have faith in that. We have to have faith in our identity. And our identity comes from our Creator, and that we are truly an image of God. And that's what we're meant to be at our core. When human beings, obviously, I'm thinking of this quote that we did last year with Austin, which is, man is found in the sincere gift of himself, which I forget where, I think it's from Gaudium et Spes. I believe is where that quote is from. And that is when you are at the true core, being an image of God, when you are being a gift. And so as human beings, that is the positive regression line that we believe is happening, that we are coming more and more towards becoming the image of God that we were made to be. And so this is the faith that we must have to have hope in the world, to have hope in the future of the world, that human beings are inherently good and are trying to be the truest, best version of themselves, which is as the fullest an image of God.
Yeah. And I think so. JP2, men cannot fully find himself except through a sincere gift of himself.
Yeah.
And I think also when you talk about we talk about this general positive towards good, right? This positive slope towards good, which I agree that we had a really cool conversation about that, and I think it is gentler sometimes. Obviously, we look out in the world and it's crazy and hectic, but I think something that we also have to
Shout out.
shout out
Quick
my
shout
mom.
out.
Something that we also have to think about, guys. I'm suffering from the most severe cold you've ever seen. Um,
A
so
cold in June in Texas. How does that
cold
even
in
work? I
June
don't
in
know.
Texas. But something also we have to kind of talk about is, what is um, what is the faith that we have in the systems we're in, right? So I think we talked a lot about papal and fallacy and trust in the Pope and a lot when he was first elected. But I'm going to bring that back up and saying you know, if you think that man trends towards good, and you think that men are good and whatnot, right? Yada yada yada, all this, or that at the heart of our beings that we're made in the image of God and that we're actively trying to choose good, then we have to trust the
Whoops.
things that
There we
God
go.
picks for us. Because if we can't trust what God picks for us, then going back, we don't believe that that's truly good for us. And so having faith in our future is also having faith in our now, in the decisions that we've made, the decisions that have accumulated into our current pope, our current leadership, our current XYZ, right? Because like it or not, as products of all the things that happened before us, and there's so much we have to have faith in our decisions going forward. We have to have faith in our decisions of those around us, in the decisions of the people that are running our lives sometimes, right? And if we can't have faith in those types of people, then it's really hard to say like, hey, I believe in this wholeheartedly, because at the end of the day, you can't say that if you don't have faith in those decisions, right? So I think that's another thing we have to put stock in, is how much do we believe in those people? How much do we have faith in those people that are driving our lives, that are making decisions for us? Because yeah, if we can't have faith in those, then that's almost akin to having no faith in ourselves.
Yeah, and I think we are at a very interesting point of our lives to discuss this. Obviously, when you're young, we really begin our lives and end our lives, especially having to put complete faith in other people, complete faith in other people, because when you're born, when you're a newborn, when you're a toddler, when you're even younger or even just a little bit older than that, you don't have control over your life and what happens, right? Not really. You are completely in the hands of your parents or whoever is your guardian once you're born. And do you lack this faith in those people when you're that young? Not really. I'm going to steal an image from our priest down at Alabama, Father Mugaga. One of his most favorite images to do for us is to talk about the young baby when she's in her father's arms and he throws her up in the air. And what does the baby do? Does the baby freaking out? Is it losing faith knowing that it could fall and potentially get harmed? Absolutely not. The baby, you throw it up and it's absolutely smiling, it's laughing, it's so excited, and has complete faith in the other person, in the father, in the mother, whoever it is that's throwing them up in the air. They know that they're going to be caught. They have not an ounce of fear, really, that there's something bad that could happen. And then once we get to old age as well, we're putting our faith in other people, whether it's our children who are helping us, whether it's the nursing home that we're at. We're putting complete faith in these other people. So we begin and end our lives at that point. But we, right now, Evan and I, right here, we're in college. Cole as well is in college. And so we are really at a great transition point for this quote, because we have to put now a lot of faith in ourselves as just an individual, because we're in college right now. We're trying to figure out what we want to do in life. We have to work hard in school. We have to find internships. We have to be able to make money. We have to have that faith in ourselves to advance in life and to be able to do the things that we hope God is leading us to do. But if we don't have that faith, what happens? And so if you go through your life, especially leading up to the age that we're at now, and say you distrust your parents or you've had this lack of faith in your life, that can be really difficult. Be really difficult to be able to have that faith and hope in yourself and your own abilities, and really a faith in God that He's going to lead you to somewhere. And that is why faith is so instrumental to our lives. And without it, we would not cease to exist, but it would be really difficult to live as a human being without faith. And we see that in the secular world, that people who are just have a foundation that is so shaky, right? And wow, I used Cole's word right there. But a shaky foundation, I used right, if you didn't hear. Yeah. But they have this shaky foundation and they look to the outside world to try to find and try to put their faith in these things. And in reality, as human beings, we cannot put our faith entirely on human beings, because eventually human beings will fail. That faith will not completely fall apart, but it will not always succeed. But our faith in God will always succeed. That is why we say that God is the firm foundation. And although we should put faith in ourselves, we know that we're going to fail at one point. We know that one day we could go into a test and it's not going to go in very well. We could go into a meeting with our boss and it might not go very well. But if we have that faith in ourselves and that faith in God, we come out of that and we realize and we remember what our foundation is and why we can still push forward and go forth and still trend on that positive line instead of letting everything fall apart.
Yeah, and I like this kind of brings up, you're talking about when you were older, but John 21:18, amen, amen, I say to you, when you were younger, you used to dress yourself and go where you wanted, but when you grow old, you will stretch out your hands and someone else will dress you and lead you where you do not want to go. So I think, we talked a lot about kind of how this looks from our perspective, but also I think some reflection needs to be done with, like, we're going to have to live in the world that we create. We're going to have to live in the life that we create at the end of the day. Whether it's when we're 60, whether it's when we're 30, whether it's when we're 110, which I hope to live to 110. I think that'd be sick.
I got
But we're gonna
over
have to
under I got over under 85 and a half.
really, ouch.
Is
I
that low?
think
Is that low?
well,
Would
I
you
don't
would you
know. I
hammer
mean,
the over?
that's not bad. That's not bad for you. I'd hammer the under.
What about yourself?
I don't know. A lot of my grandparents are very long lived. Like a lot of my grandparents are already over 85. So, um, I'm shooting for yeah. I'm
Those
shooting for
those odds will become available on the Instagram page later in the week for anyone that
absolutely,
likes to place a
absolutely,
bet.
absolutely. Cole's life expectancy is going to be 37. Um, no, but we kind of have to lead this life that we've created, and so I like this quote. I like this verse a lot because it talks about like okay, the people around you, whoever's around you when you're an old fart, is going to be the people that are leading you wherever you are. And so, what is the world you create around you when you're living your life? And so, for me, when I look at a lot of the old people that I see, when I look at a lot of the people who rely on others that I see they're unhappy, and I see that is a fruit of what they've done in their lives up to that point, right? Because if you're unhappy, if you're making decisions that upset people, you're making decisions that are not good for the longevity of the world you live in, of the community you're in, then obviously that community, that bond is not going to be there when you have to rely on others. And so, as much as we talk about building the world for ourselves, building the world for the future, we also have to remember that the people around us are going to be the people around us at the end of our life. For some of them, right? Obviously, not all of them, but um, I think a lot of building what we want to see in the world. I'm going to bring up a Michael Jackson quote here in a second. Take a gander at the song if you want to in the comments. But a lot of what we want to build in the world is taking a look at yourself and making a change. That is "Man in the Mirror" by Michael Jackson. But it rings true as much as he sang it back in the 1900s, which is a funny thing I like doing because it was the 1900s. Um, as much as it is today, because it still is. If you want to make a change, if you want to see something different in the world, then the first person you need to look at is always going to be yourself. Um, another, remove the splinter or remove the plank from your eye before you talk about the splinter in mine. Really, get into that mode of where can I refine myself? Where can I have faith in myself? Where can I have trust in my decisions before I start going out and getting involved in other people's lives and other people's decisions and other people's business, especially if you're apt to make mistakes, as we all are, because it's embarrassing when you go out and you try to solve someone else's business and it ends up being that you've made a mistake in judgment or something like that. So yeah, MJ can't be Shepherd of the Week, but really great quotes from his songs.
Yeah, and one of my favorite things to say to kind of go off of what you're talking about is control what you can control. One of the biggest things you probably hear if you played sports with your coaches, one of the biggest coach speak things ever. But it is so true. And Nick Saban, I believe, was one of the coaches who really liked to coin this phrase as well. But going along and what I've learned in the past couple years, a little bit with psychology and with mindfulness specifically, is that that's all you can do. That's all you can do is control what you can control. And what are things that you can control? You can control, as you said, as Evan said, the man in the mirror. And there's a lot of people in this world that try to control things that they can't control. And that's what they let control their emotions. And that's what controls their entire lives almost. Like, I'm a big sports fan. Evan's a big sports fan. No, we let the results of our teams control us a little bit at times, which that's okay sometimes, obviously. But there are people who are so into sports, whether it's because of sports betting or sports fandom, where they let the outcome control them in a excessive way, where it's so controlling and the rest of their day is ruined. I remember one of our friends from Alabama, Jersey Mike, if you remember him, Evan, of
Ugh.
course, Jersey Mike, he talked about he's a big Jets fan. But he said how his uncle is so obsessed with the Jets that it affects everything. And obviously, the Jets are a pretty poverty franchise in the NFL. So his life, because of just the Jets, hasn't been that great, is what Jersey Mike was telling me. And this is not, we cannot live this way where we let these outside things control us. Now, we can like experience them, of course, like a bad loss. We can experience that, but we should not allow these things to carry over into the rest of our lives. And that's where we have to step up and have that faith in ourselves. Like, oh, I have control over myself. I can go forth with this. I can move past this and take the good in it and move on. Like, you have a time in your life, you say, okay, I messed up on that test, but I know I've got another one in 3 weeks. That's what I can control now. The one thing that no one in the entirety of humanity will be able to control, has ever been able to control, is the past. You cannot, never will be able to control the past. And yet, how often in society do we see people, or just in general with people, so focused on trying to control the past, whether it's their persona, whether it's their memories, whatever it may be. We can never control the past, but yet we let it affect our lives so much. And I can speak from personal experience with this as well, letting the past affect us. But it's one of the most things that we cannot let affect us. Control what we can control, which is the present moment, which is why my favorite thing about mindfulness, all it's about is trying to get you to focus and be in the present moment, because that's the only thing that we can control in life. And that is where we find that we're able to just enjoy the present moment and just be a gift. And that's one of my favorite things about this podcast, is we get to sit here and just be a gift to other people, right? I don't know how many people listen, and that's not really for us, to care about, honestly. But we're able to just sit here and provide what we have and just be a gift. And that is what, as we said earlier with the quote from St. John Paul II, that's where we're found in ourselves. And that's why I think Evan wanted to join this podcast, whether he knew it or not. Deep in his heart, he wanted to be that gift. He wanted to provide. And same thing with Cole and I. That's why we wanted to start it in the first place, is because we have all these things. We want to be able to give. So to be able to give is a very beautiful thing. You
No.
have to have faith in yourself to be able to give.
I'm actually in it for the huge payout.
I mean, he did get a pretty big contract, ladies and gentlemen. We can't even lie.
Well, I also think another coachism I always turn to, if that's what we can term these two things, is kind of the stick to the basics. Like, do the basics well. I'm sure you heard this in baseball, because it's all about
absolutely.
form with hitting.
I mean, for baseball, I think it's the most fundamental sport. Like, if you just do the fundamental things, you will put yourself in position. And for other sports,
Catch,
I don't
throw,
know, but
hit.
yeah.
But do the basics well. And why I bring that up in relation to this quote, right? Again, we're talking so much about, okay, how do we make these decisions? How do we run our lives? How do we do this? X, Y, Z. Boom. Like, make it not a thought about the easy things. Trust your decisions on the easy things, because you make the right decision every single time, right? That's the basics. And, in sports, right, we talk about like making the 5-yard pass, blocking your man as a lineman, right? Catch, throw in baseball as an outfielder, right? Locate the ball, get under it, support hand, boom. And so do the basics well, because that's where you can build off of your life. If you're in that place where you kind of feel like, okay, I can't trust the decisions I'm making, I don't know what I'm doing, I feel like I'm on the wrong path, come back to the basics. Do the easy stuff, whether that's like we talk about, like a routine for prayer, whether that's just like waking up out of bed with a timer, and then getting out of bed, starting your day with breakfast, and going from there, right? Return to those basics so that you can say to yourself, like, hey, this is where I'm coming from, and I know I'm doing these things right, and let's orient my life around this. And then the other stuff becomes easier, and the other stuff becomes, I can have more faith in this, I can have more trust in this, I can have more desire to change this part of my life, these bigger parts, because the smaller parts I have my faith and I have my trust in.
Yeah, and especially for baseball is where this rings clear for me. But baseball, you have a lot of slumps. Every single season, if you're a baseball player, you had a slump. And what do they tell you? I know my dad told me this so many times. When you fall into a slump, let's just go back to the basics. Let's just go back to the basics. And so we just go hit, and you just go back to the basics, the simple things. And so to put this in real life perspective, you have to build those basics, as Evan talked about, with either your prayer life, especially your prayer life, and then getting out of bed, whatever it may be. Once you see yourself falling into a slump, one, it's great to recognize that. And second, it's, okay, what do I need to do? There might be so many things going on in that rough slump part of your life, but you can't change everything in one day, but simply go back to the basics. So go back to those simple things in life that are easy to do, that you're able to make that habit once again. Because I know for my life, whenever I fall into a slump, whether it's, wow, I'm making so many bad decisions, there's so much just temptation going on right now, everything seems awry, I don't feel like I'm hearing God at all in my life, or I don't even know if he's present in my life right now. You look at it and you're like, well, I haven't done the basics. I haven't gone to mass. I haven't gone to just say hi in adoration for a little bit. I haven't even prayed at all. And you're like, oh. And then it happens over and over again. And you finally, like, at some point, you're like, man, it's just these basic things that I keep letting get awry, and that's what causes this. It's
Yeah.
not these big things, it's just the simple things. And everything in life, in some way, it points us towards this, whether it's with our studies, right? What happens when we fall behind? It's probably because at the beginning of the semester, at one point, we lost the basics of just staying up to date with our homework, staying up to date with our studying. With sports, you just fall behind on practice a couple days. Oh, then you can't
Yeah.
hit. Your prayer, you just a couple days. Oh, I need to go do this. I need to go do that. And the prayer gets lost behind. And then it's just the simple things in life. And if we just turn those around, if we just stick to the basics, everything will be okay. And it's you think about it, all the cliches in life, they all are incredible quotes, but everyone thinks about them as coach speak, as cliches. But if you stick to them, they work, right? They work. And that's what made his name just pops out, because he was so good at it. Nick Saban, he was so good at drilling into his culture, his entire program's just persona, these cliches, but they lived them out, and that's what made them so incredible. Nick Saban, obviously he was great at adapting, but he had those simple things that they would always come back to, and that's what made them so good for so many years. And it wasn't like, yes, Nick Saban did some special things, some extraordinary things, but he did the ordinary in an extraordinary way, and that is the key to life.
Yeah. I think before we go to the PPP for the day, the last sports metaphor I'll use is, in addition to that doing the basic stuff, like recognizing when you need correction is important. Like you're talking about, like, oh, I can recognize I'm in a slump. That's good, right? But also, like, I think in golf, a lot of times where you get in trouble, for us golfers who aren't on the PGA Tour, is like you put it in the rough and you're like, man, I can hit out of the rough onto the green. And then it's like rough to rough. And then you're like, I can hit out of the rough onto the green. And then it's rough to rough. Instead of just like, okay, I'm in like 5 yards of rough. Let me just chip out onto the fairway and hit from that nice green, beautifully manicured lawn out there. And so don't go from rough to rough. Recognize you need, an adjustment, and chip out of the rough onto the fairway. And then that's where you can start again, right? And that's those basics I'm talking about. That's that coach speak. That's those basics. That's those simple things, the easy things that we can return to help us kind of begin again,
Yeah,
start
absolutely.
again.
I love that. I love that. Great way to end it, so we don't just drill you guys with too many sports references.
Sports
All right, we are
references.
going to move on. Bum, ba bum. The practical prayer practices of the week. All right, we've got another graphic for you guys this week for the practical prayer practice. We're doing better at those for sure, and I'm liking them a lot. Okay, so our practical prayer practice of the week. Obviously, we had JFK, former president, and then we talked a little bit, about society and what's going on in the world and having faith in the world and what's going to happen with the future. So our practical prayer practice for this week is praying for the world. And I know sometimes I actually forget about this a good amount, but I know people who pray about this all the time, whether it be for abortion, to end to abortion, of course, whether it be just for world peace, end to world hunger, for governments, for societies, whatever it may be in the world. I know people that are just so into this, so I'm definitely going to try to step it up this week with praying for the world, and that can be as simple as just asking God to, please, Lord, help the world to be safe. It could be dedicating a whole rosary towards something going on in the world. I know there's, of course, lots of conflict going on in Israel and in Ukraine. Those are the top two spots that I know of in the world that could definitely use prayers with, obviously, war and conflict and potential loss of life. So if you can't think of anything else, return to those two. And of course, always for an end to abortion. I would say those are the top three things if you can't think of anything else. You got anything over there,
Yeah.
Evan?
No, I think also I always Bama Catholic regularly posts like the Holy Father's intentions for the month, which I will say, until I was like 17 or something, I just assumed nobody knew what his intentions were,
Hmm.
and that we were just like praying for
Yeah.
his intentions. I didn't realize they put them out and you're supposed to
I
pray with
didn't know
them.
that until right now either.
Yeah. So like they'll post like, oh, the Holy Father's intentions for this month are for X, Y, and Z, right? It's usually like three-ish things. Um, but I think also praying with those, like praying for the world is good. And I always think about the worlds, our human world and our physical world. Like, yes, pray for the world and us in it, in our cooperation, in our, states, our nations, our countries, all of that. Pray for all of that, the people. But also pray for the natural places, pray for the protection of those, pray for the sustainable use of those, because that's so important too, right? The world that we live on is so important to us because we live on it and we need to take care of it. So in addition to praying for, obviously the people, the countries, the conflict, the bad things, the good things is important to pray for too. Pray for the natural bits, and then yeah, factor in that the prayers of the Holy Father for the month, because it usually contains like pray for the world and XYZ or
Yeah.
something like that. So
And it's interesting to think about that the entirety of creation is God's creation. And at the end of his 7 days of creating the world, he said that it is good. So that means that the devil, not only is he going to try to attack us as human beings because we are in the image of God, he hates us, number one, more than anything. But as Evan said, he's going to want to attack the world as well because all of the world is God's creation. The devil hates all of it. So I think a really good prayer to add to this as well will be the Saint Michael prayer, to the Saint Michael the Archangel prayer, and this comes from Pope Leo the 13th, the last Pope Leo we had before the current one, and he had this vision that the 20th century would be just kind of the devil's century. The devil was going to have be able to control a lot of things, and a lot of terrible things were going to happen in that century. And he was so terrified that he eventually formed the Saint Michael prayer to protect the church, to protect the world, and for Saint Michael and all the archangels and all the spiritual warfare on the Lord's side to really, it's a prayer of spiritual strength against the powers of the devil. So a really good prayer to go with. And I was listening to a podcast yesterday with Bishop Robert Barron. Had to slide this in somehow, Evan. And he was talking about this prayer. And it says, let me get it pulled up real quick. He had a really good point about it. Let me just find it real quick. All right, the Saint Michael the Archangel prayer. And it says in this prayer that the gates of hell will not prevail against the powers of God. And so he talked about this in an interesting way that I'd never really thought about. But so a lot of people want to think about the Catholic Church or just God in general and his warriors and his kingdom as kind of a defensive group. They're holding back the devil from overtaking. But actually what this says, the gates of hell will not prevail against him, against God. What that really says is that the Lord, our God, his kingdom is on the offensive against the devil. He's going to their gates, to the devil's gates, and those gates will not prevail. So we are on the offensive. And so with this prayer, we can receive that strength. We can receive hope and faith that God is the one who's going to win this war. We know God already won and that he's going to win and continue to win over the devil. So just a great prayer for strength and for the world, especially when we see times of despair and all the destruction that happens on earth, to remember that God is ultimately and always in control, which is so exciting to have that faith.
yeah, absolutely beautiful.
All right, we are going to.
Yeah, let's go. No, let's
Yeah.
go. Let's go. Shepherd of the week.
All right, you want to do it?
No, I got. Oh, I'll intro, but you got to
Okay.
make the music. Last
Okay.
week was bad with us making the music.
Oh, the shepherd of the week. All right, ladies and gentlemen, our shepherd of the week comes from Evan Abear. I had an idea, but we had already used it, which happens sometimes. We're on episode 55 right now, so we don't want to repeat anything. So we have our shepherd of the week. Gotta pull it up real quick on the visuals for y'all. Evan, you can intro our shepherd
Oh
of the
yeah,
week.
yeah. So our shepherd of the week is Saint Hyacinth, who I'm wearing a Team Grusho shirt. I was in New Hampshire celebrating with Alex Grusho, who I'm sure some of you know. He had his bodybuilding show this past weekend, so I was up there supporting him. But the patron saint on the back of this shirt is Saint Hyacinth, patron saint of weightlifters. And the story goes that a church was collapsing, and Saint Hyacinth was was in the church, and he told himself that he needed to grab the monstrance, the ciborium full of hosts. And so he went to grab it. And as he was leaving the church with this monstrous, the ciborium of hosts, he heard Mary's voice saying, "Save me too." And so he grabbed this large stone statue of Mary, as like you can see kind of in the icon, he's got this statue of Mary. But he grabbed this huge stone statue of Mary that apparently was like more than anyone could ever lift, and he carried it out of the church along with the hosts as well. And so he today is the patron saint of powerlifters, of bodybuilders, of weightlifters. He is a Polish Dominican friar from the early 1200s, but obviously a huge devotion to Mary, a huge devotion to the Eucharist at such a young time in the youngish time in the church. Um, but just such a good example of what we should do for the body of Christ, what we should do for our Blessed Mother in times of crisis. But yeah, wonderful saint, really cool guy. I've loved really hearing Alex just have such a devotion to him, have such an attachment to him, and a pretty based individual as well. What are you got any thoughts over there, Instagram?
Yeah, I mean this is pretty cool. I didn't know this story coming in. I
Yeah.
was waiting to hear what Evan had to say. That's a really cool little story there from Saint Hyacinth, and I think I'm not sure, how much of our audience is weightlifters, whether they go to the gym or not. But I know that all three of us, me, Evan, and Cole, we like to get after it. We like to work out. I've gotten Cole a lot more into it since January is when he really began his weightlifting journey, and I know he's enjoyed it. And it not only is it a great way to glorify God, but you can tell that God intended human beings to work out and to stay fit because you see in the world when people work out, when they stay healthy like that, not only is their body healthy, but mentally they are in such better places. It's been studied for years how working out at least 3 times a week helps your mental health. It helps you to be able to fight off, like your immune system is better. You're just in such a better place when you work out. And obviously, there's so many things in life where we see people doing them and we know it causes bad things, but they do it anyway. So we can see, okay, if it causes bad things, it's probably because God doesn't want you to do it. But then you have things like weightlifting causes good things for your body. God probably intended for you to do this. And so for anyone that doesn't work out, I would like to say Saint Hyacinth is calling you right now. Get into the gym and just put a little bit of effort in, 30 to 45 minutes 3 times a day, or 3 times a week, excuse me. 3 times a day, that'd be pretty legit. I mean, you'd be in Alex Crusoe
12
weightlifting.
workout days. Yeah.
But yeah, the gym is a great place. I know when I'm stretching, when I'm working out, that my body feels better. Mentally, I feel so much better. And yeah, I'm definitely going to incorporate some prayers to Saint Hyacinth during my lifts as well now. So that is going to be pretty fire. I mean, do you think Saint Hyacinth hit the gym, or do you think this was just a raw, like clean? He just went in there, just nothing, just like, all right, I'm going to pick up this giant statue. No, nothing, doesn't need no pre workout or anything.
Yeah, I think this had to be God given strength, honestly. Because it's one of those things where the story goes that the statue was, quote, far more than he could normally carry. So I'm thinking this is like, like a life-size stone statue that he's carrying in
Yeah.
my mind, that just like is not like no normal person would be able to lift it, period. Like if you
Yeah.
had lifted every day of your life, especially back in, whatever, 12, this was in
1200, yeah.
1240.
Yeah.
So, I don't think really anybody was hitting the iron back
Yeah.
then,
Ladies and
in
gentlemen,
the
though,
ways that we do.
let us make this so clear. Just because you may pray to St. Hyacinth and you might incorporate God into your lifts does not mean that you magically are going to be able to lift crazy more weight. Don't be putting too
1,200
much on the bar.
pounds.
uh, but yeah, don't forget, get in the gym. I didn't think that we'd be calling people to get in the gym on this podcast, but absolutely get in the gym, ladies and gentlemen, and ask for St. Hyacinth to help you. And always remember that you are glorifying God through weightlifting and through keeping your temple healthy.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, Evan, we are 45 minutes into this episode. We've done a pretty good job. I know you and Cole did yours around an hour last week with just the two of you, but I'm going to be honest, I don't think we have a ton left on
Oh,
our
no.
quote. We've
When we had Yapopotamus Prime doing his thing, so, um, as I affectionately have called him for the first time. But yeah, I think just final thoughts, right? We have to be able to trust ourselves. We have to be able to trust in the people around us. Um, and yeah, I think a big part of what we talked about was kind of just return to the basics. When you're in doubt, when you're not sure about what's going on, when you're untrue to what you want to believe in, return to the basics, return to the simple stuff, and then build from there. Build onto the complicated ideas from there. Um, it's a lot harder to fail that way. Yeah.
Yeah, and you talked about returning to the basics. I'm going to talk a little bit about beginning with the basics. Some people may be wondering, like, well, I return to the basics. I don't even know how to start. So, Evan, looks like your video is glitching a little bit right there. Looks
Yeah,
like
my
you're good now, though.
my monitor just turned off randomly, but I'm back.
All right. So, starting with the basics, how do we begin? And simple things that I like to talk about when I try to introduce people to prayer is just talk to God. We as a human beings are images of God. And how do we get to know somebody? How did I get to know Evan Abear? We just started, yapping about sports probably. I actually don't remember our first encounter, to be honest with you, Evan.
I,
But
I have no idea.
I'm sure it was about just talking basics, right? Talking about simple things, sports, video games, probably intramural sports as well. Simple stuff. And this is exactly, we get this image from our humanity. This is exactly how we should begin our relationship with God. He did all these things. He came down on earth. He died for us. For what? For a relationship with us. And so we have relationships with human beings. We have relationship with God. They shouldn't be, obviously, they should be different in a way. Like God, our relationship with God should be different, but also can be similar. You start with the basics. You just start talking to them about anything. I always say this when I start talking to people about this. I was at Search Retreat last fall, and I was talking to this, and there were a few girls in our group, and I was like, you can, like, I was talking to the guys, like, talk to God about sports, talk to God about weightlifting, and then to the girls, like, you can talk to God about shopping. It can literally be whatever. God just wants to talk to you. So just start with the basics of talking to him about that. You could be in college, in high school, you could talk to him about school. You could be an adult. You could have kids. You could talk to him about your kids. Tell him how awesome your kids are. Tell him how much your kids annoy you and you just want to go to sleep sometimes. It could be whatever it might be. Just talk to him. Just the very basic. And then second beginning thing that I would say is find a way to incorporate the Blessed Sacrament into your life. Whether that means going to Mass more than once a week so you can receive the Eucharist more than once a week, or go into adoration a couple times a week if possible. And that can be just as little as 5 minutes in adoration. I know for us down in Alabama, we have our adoration chapel. Cole and I and many more will simply just open the door when we're walking by and say hi to Jesus. It can be as simple as just opening the door, seeing the Blessed Sacrament, seeing the Lord, and saying hi. And remembering, seeing his physical presence, and then having his spiritual presence come with you for the rest of your day. Just very simple right there. Just a few minutes of conversation, few minutes being in his presence. That is the simplest part of prayer, the simple basic definition. is putting yourself in the presence of God. And you don't even have to do anything sometimes if you just want to listen and imagine yourself in the presence of the Lord, and just put yourself in that place. He can do wondrous things with that, and your relationship will just start to blossom. Just begin with that. And I know for Evan and I, that's where we return when we see ourselves falling out of line.
Yeah. Yeah. No, great advice for rekindling that prayer life. Um with that said, unless you have any final thoughts, just a few reminders. Go connect on whatever it is. If it's on Spotify, go, like, subscribe to the podcast on YouTube, leave a comment, just go connect, go reach out. I think we what we should do is collect questions over the summer, so when we get back to school, we should do another mailbag because those were honestly very
That
fun.
was fun. Good
Um,
episode.
and I think we got a good engagement on that, but also
Yep.
it was really fun to shoot. Um, but yeah, keep interacting with the Instagram reels, keep interacting with all that stuff. Um, Buy merch. I know I have recently purchased my shirt, so now I can tell Nazario to purchase his shirt. But yeah, go out, buy the shirts. They're great quality. They're great, great design, really cool colors, and pretty
Multiple different colors.
inexpensive.
Yeah.
Yeah, multiple different colors. I think 6 or 7 different
Yeah.
colors. Yeah, and just pretty inexpensive for a shirt nowadays. I feel like I pay $35 for a shirt, so seeing $20 for a shirt was very nice. But yeah, like, comment, subscribe. Thank you all for listening to episode number 55 of the Lost Sheep podcast. Have a wonderful week and God bless.